when the bride's spirit who died tragically returns from the grave to curse the bloodline. The film begins by showing a woman named Allison who is traveling to her childhood home with her husband Richard and their young son Seth. The trip feels overwhelmingly heavy for Allison, who has just received the tragic news that her father John was found dead by hanging. John was the only family Allison had left after her mother Susan passed away from cancer when Allison was still a child. Allison is filled with deep sorrow, facing the painful reality that she has now truly lost everyone she ever loved. Her childhood home, once filled with beautiful memories and happy moments with her parents, now feels like a place that only holds echoes of the past. Upon arriving at the house, Allison slowly walks through every corner filled with memories of her time with her parents. Allison and Richard then decide to stay in the house for a while, hoping to find some peace and comfort amidst the grief they are experiencing. When night comes, Allison, who has fallen asleep, suddenly has a nightmare in which she experiences sleep paralysis and sees the apparition of a woman in a bridal costume. Fortunately, Richard is right beside her and quickly wakes her up. But this is not Allison's first time dealing with nightmares. Since childhood, she has often been haunted by dreams involving the same woman in a bridal dress. No matter where she goes, it's as if the nightmares are an inseparable part of her sleep, constantly haunting Allison. The next day after Richard leaves for work, Allison feels the need to distract herself from the nightmares. She decides to spend her free time cleaning the house, hoping the activity will give her a bit of calm. After hours of tidying up, Allison feels slightly better. Suddenly, she hears Seth crying. She quickly rushes to his room. Seeing Seth awake and crying, Allison gently picks him up and tries to soothe him back to sleep. Then her eyes fall on a thread on Seth's mattress. The thread reminds her of the past, of Susan, who used to work as a seamstress. Susan often spent her time in front of the sewing machine, creating various clothes with her skills. As night falls, Richard returns home after a full day of work and brings good news. He is being considered for a promotion. However, to accept the new position, Richard must undergo several days of training out of town. He asks for Allison's permission to go. Allison, still grieving after John's death, feels she desperately needs Richard by her side. Her overwhelming sadness makes her reluctant to be left alone. Firmly, Allison tells Richard to reject the offer. Richard faces a painful dilemma. On one hand, he doesn't want to waste such a rare opportunity for his career. On the other hand, he feels guilty leaving Allison alone in her grief. Faced with two difficult choices, Richard reluctantly decides to attend the training, leaving Allison behind in hopes that the decision will bring long-term benefits for their future. He knows this chance may never come again. Richard's decision, however, leaves Allison heartbroken, causing her to walk away from the dinner table in sadness. For me, it's just... I'll be going away for a few days for a training course. My father just committed suicide. Come on, Allison, what's wrong? What you could do was at least stay by my side. Then, just after Allison finishes putting Seth to sleep, she hears the faint sound of a spinning top. The sound pulls her back into her childhood, reminding her of a traumatic experience that nearly cost her life. When Allison was a little girl, she once saw a spinning top roll into a small room under the stairs. Curious, she followed it inside. But once she was in, the door suddenly locked from the outside. It was Susan who had locked her in, trapping young Allison inside the small, airless space. The next morning, John found Allison unconscious inside the cramped room under the stairs. Panic-stricken, he quickly broke open the door, carried her out, and tried to help her breathe. When Allison finally regained consciousness, John hugged her tightly, overwhelmed with relief that his daughter was still alive. With a trembling voice, he apologized to Allison for what Susan had done and tried to explain the truth behind it. John revealed that Susan, whom Allison had always known as a loving and gentle mother, was actually suffering from a mental illness that affected her mind. The incident that almost took Allison's life wasn't intentional. It was a tragic result of Susan's unstable condition, which made her unaware of her own actions. Back in the present day, morning arrives once again. Allison, still wrapped in the memories of her past, watches as Richard packs his things for his out-of-town training. Richard explains with a heavy heart that if he doesn't leave today, his boss will give the position to someone else, and he'll lose the opportunity forever. If I don't get on that plane, they will send someone else in my place. Later that night, Allison falls asleep and once again experiences sleep paralysis. She senses the presence of the same woman in a bridal gown slowly approaching Seth's crib. Helpless in her paralyzed state, Allison struggles to move until with every ounce of strength left in her body, she finally manages to wake up. That night, shaken and terrified, Allison calls Richard to tell him she's had another nightmare. She insists that the woman in the bridal dress isn't just a dream. She believes the figure has a dark intention, trying to take Seth away. Richard, thinking Allison is simply exhausted and stressed by all that's happened recently, gently tells her to calm down. He advises her to take a sedative and get some proper rest. After hanging up the phone, Allison tries to steady her breathing and calm her nerves. But the silence doesn't last long. Suddenly she hears a strange noise coming from the attic. Gathering her courage, she goes to check. Once she's up there, she finds an old family videotape labeled 1995. Curious, Allison hurries to the living room and plays the tape she just discovered. The recording begins on March 12, 1995, showing happy family moments from Allison's childhood. John, Susan, and little Allison playing hide and seek, laughing and enjoying their time together. But amid those warm memories, Allison suddenly freezes. One of the scenes shows her younger self drawing something disturbing, a frightening, almost sinister image. Allison grows anxious, wondering why she would draw something so dark as a child. The tape then jumps to May 11, 1995. This time, John is seen inviting two priests into the house. They sit together in the living room, discussing something serious. One of the priests, Father Albert, expresses his concern and wants to determine whether Susan's behavioral changes are caused by a psychological disorder or perhaps a supernatural disturbance influencing her. Albert asks whether Susan has been taken to a doctor. John explains that he has already taken her to several specialists, followed every medical recommendation, and given her the prescribed medications. Yet, despite all the treatments, there has been no improvement. In fact, Susan's condition has grown worse. Feeling desperate, John confides that this is why he invited Albert. He hopes that with spiritual help, they might bring Susan back to the person she once was. At the end of the recording, dated May 18, 1995, Susan appears in a deeply disturbing state, violently pulling out her own hair. John, who is filming the event, is visibly shocked and terrified by what he's witnessing. When the tape ends, Allison immediately searches for information about Father Albert, hoping to find clues that might explain what truly happened to her mother in the past. After hours of searching, Allison finally discovers where Albert now lives. She believes that meeting him is the only way to uncover the truth behind her family's mysterious history, and perhaps also the key to understanding the nightmares that have haunted her for so long. When Allison arrives at Albert's house, she realizes that he has long since left the priesthood. She begins explaining the reason for her visit, introducing herself as the daughter of John and Susan. Allison tells him she wants to learn the truth about what happened 25 years ago when Albert was involved in her parents' lives. She hopes he still remembers those events and is willing to speak honestly about what really occurred. Albert falls silent for a moment, as if trying to recall those distant memories. His calm expression suddenly turns tense when Allison mentions the names John and Susan. It's clear that the memories of Allison's parents are not easily forgotten. As if unwilling to relive those painful moments, Albert refuses to tell her anything and orders Allison to leave his house. Despite her desperate pleas for an explanation, Albert insists she go. Before leaving, Allison tells him in a worried tone that she now lives in her parents' old house with her husband and child, and she feels something isn't right there, something that makes her feel unsafe. How can I help? My name is Ellison. Can you please tell me what happened? About 25 years ago, a man came to... There's nothing to tell, nothing to remember. I'm sorry, I don't remember that name. Father Albert! The next day, while Allison is putting Seth to sleep, the doorbell rings. When she checks, she finds Albert standing there. He has changed his mind and wants to help her resolve what's happening. Allison invites him inside and they sit together in the living room. She begins by explaining how she found out about him through the old tape discovered in her parents' attic. Then, with a trembling voice, she asks the question that has haunted her for years, the truth about her mother's death. Allison confides that she had always believed her mother died of cancer, as her father had told her. That's when Albert begins to reveal the truth. 25 years ago, John came to him seeking help, convinced that Susan was possessed by a malicious spirit that had taken control of her and caused her erratic behavior. When Albert and his assistant arrived at John's house, they found that Susan was indeed under possession by a powerful entity. Albert and his assistant tried their best to perform an exorcism, but the spirit's strength was overwhelming. During the ritual, the spirit spoke through Susan, declaring that it was the spirit of a bride who had been murdered by someone in their bloodline. In the end, Susan died under the spirit's influence. To the serenity of being your faithful God, you were not dead, nothing. Recognize the invincible power of the she who dwells spirits at identity Mariana. Tell me your name. The tragedy left Albert devastated, filled with guilt and regret for failing in his duty as a priest. After the spirit claimed Susan's life, it seemed to vanish completely, leaving behind an eerie calm. But that peace didn't last long. Over time, strange disturbances began to occur in John's home. Objects moved on their own and disembodied whispers filled the air. The activity grew more intense until the apparition of the woman in the bridal gown began to appear before John's eyes. The haunting escalated day by day, tormenting John without mercy, driving him to live in constant fear. Unable to bear the terror any longer, John ultimately took his own life by hanging himself not long ago. Hearing all this, Allison is overcome with fear and confusion. The nightmares she's been having suddenly make horrifying sense. She asks Albert who the bride's spirit truly is and whether it has any connection to her family's dark past. Albert explains that the woman in the bridal gown is named Mary, and she is the malevolent spirit who once possessed Susan. It is revealed that Mary was the first wife of Allison's grandfather. After their marriage, Mary mysteriously disappeared without a trace. Despite massive searches conducted by local residents and the police, not a single clue about Mary's whereabouts was ever found. Years later, Allison's grandfather remarried a woman named Catherine, and from that marriage were born 2 daughters, Maya and Susan, Allison's mother. However, the happiness of this new family did not last long. Maya, the eldest daughter, died at a young age, leaving Susan as the only surviving child who grew up to adulthood. While Albert is recounting all of this, Allison's attention drifts toward a mirror in the corner of the room, reflecting Seth's crib. Hi. In the mirror's reflection, she sees Mary's ghost standing near Seth, reaching toward him as if trying to take him away. Shocked and terrified, Allison suddenly sees Mary manifest right before her eyes. Overwhelmed by fear and the constant haunting, Allison decides they must leave the house immediately. She believes that by escaping, she can protect her family from the terror that has plagued them. But before she can go, Albert stops her. He explains that it's not the house that is cursed, it's her bloodline. Mary's vengeance is bound to the family itself. No matter where Allison runs, Mary will always find her and won't stop until she gets what she wants. Suddenly, Richard returns home from his training and finds Allison talking with Albert. At first, Allison tries to explain that Albert is only there to help them deal with the vengeful spirit of the bride who is seeking retribution for what happened in the past. But Richard, who doesn't believe in anything supernatural, angrily drives Albert out of the house, refusing to listen to any further warnings about the danger that lies ahead. Before leaving, Albert tells Allison that the only way to stop Mary's hauntings is to find her body and give it a proper burial. Only then can Mary's soul rest in peace and release the family from her curse. Later that night, as Albert is on his way home, he is attacked by Mary's spirit. Diabolical presence. The sudden shock of her apparition causes Albert to suffer a fatal heart attack, dying instantly. Meanwhile, Allison awakens from yet another nightmare involving Mary. As she tries to calm herself, she hears faint footsteps coming from downstairs. Allison cautiously goes to investigate, and to her astonishment, she sees Albert walking into a room, but something feels terribly wrong. She follows him, only to be suddenly confronted by Mary's ghost, who terrifies her into screaming hysterically. Hearing Allison's screams, Richard, who had been asleep in the living room, jumps up in panic and rushes toward the sound. When he tries to open the door to the room where Allison is trapped, it won't budge, as if something unseen is blocking it. After several tense moments, the door finally bursts open, and Richard finds Allison collapsed on the floor. She has just endured another attack from Mary, leaving her paralyzed with fear. When Allison rushes back to the bedroom to check on Seth, it's already too late. Mary has taken him. The disappearance of Seth devastates Allison, leaving her in unimaginable despair. Witnessing everything with his own eyes, Richard can no longer deny the truth. Everything Allison had told him about the supernatural terror haunting their family is now horrifyingly real. Racked with guilt for not believing her sooner, Richard holds Allison as she weeps. They contact the police to report Seth's disappearance, desperately hoping for a clue to his whereabouts. However, despite an extensive search, the investigation leads nowhere. There are no traces, no signs, and no evidence of where Seth might have gone. The police conclude that someone with a grudge against Richard's family may have kidnapped their child as an act of revenge, unaware that the real culprit is something far more sinister. Meanwhile, Richard, now convinced that what's happening is indeed supernatural, decides to seek help from a shaman named Dave, a man known for his ability to deal with spiritual disturbances. Richard and Allison hope that Dave can help them both find Seth and stop Mary's haunting once and for all. They tell Dave everything that has happened, from the first appearance of the spirit to the revelation that Mary is connected to Allison's family bloodline. Listening carefully, Dave walks through every part of the house, trying to sense whether a dark presence is still lingering around them. He observes each room intently, searching for traces of negative energy. Eventually, they bring him to Seth's room, the last place the boy was seen before he vanished. After a thorough examination, Dave takes out a small glass orb, resembling a marble, from his pocket. This orb, he explains, is a spiritual detector that changes color depending on the energy nearby. If it remains clear, there is no negative energy present. If it turns gray, that means a spirit is nearby, but generally harmless. However, if it turns black or dark, it indicates the presence of a dangerous and powerful negative force that could threaten their safety. Because Allison seems to have a stronger connection to Mary's spirit, Dave decides to perform a special ritual. He lights several candles and asks Allison to close her eyes. He tells her to focus on Seth's photograph and visualize her son's presence. As Allison concentrates, the orb in Dave's hand, which had been clear moments ago, slowly darkens. Seeing this, Dave also closes his eyes, and in an instant, his spirit is pulled into another dimension. In this strange realm, Dave sees a woman he recognizes as Mary pushing a baby carriage. When he approaches the carriage, he is horrified to see a lifeless, undeveloped fetus inside. From this, Dave realizes the terrible truth. When Mary was killed, she had been pregnant. The loss of both her life and her unborn child explains the depth of her rage and why her spirit remains trapped in this world, vengeful toward the bloodline that caused her suffering. When the ritual ends, Dave tells Allison and Richard what he saw, that Mary died while carrying a child. Her fury stems not only from her own murder, but also from the loss of her baby. This is why her spirit cursed Allison's family, seeking vengeance against all her descendants. The only way to end the curse, Dave explains, is to locate Mary's remains and bury her properly so her soul can finally rest in peace. However, there's one major problem. They have no clue where Mary's body was hidden. Without any solid leads, their mission seems nearly impossible. To bring Seth back from the other world and end the curse, Dave offers to conduct another ritual, a far more dangerous one. He warns Allison that this ritual comes with serious consequences. Once the process begins, Allison will enter a spiritual plane filled with wandering souls, both restless and malevolent. Dave cautions her not to be distracted by them and to keep her focus on finding Seth. He explains that the orb will help him detect whether Allison has successfully located Seth. If she does, he will immediately stop the ritual and bring her back. But if she loses focus, she might become trapped forever in that world. Despite the danger, Allison is determined to do whatever it takes to save her son. The ritual begins. You can close your eyes. Others you will not recognize. And we breathe in. Allison awakens in a different realm, a dark, eerie place filled with countless spirits she doesn't recognize. Some whisper, some cry, and others simply watch her as she walks past. Wanting to stay with us, so I whispered to them. Then, to her astonishment, she encounters her mother Susan and her father John. Overwhelmed with emotion, Allison runs to them, tears streaming down her face. We'll be together again. You always used to enjoy drawing. Mom? But you're dead. Everything's fine, honey. For a brief moment, she feels comforted to see them again, but she quickly remembers Dave's warning. Stay focused. She wipes her tears and continues her search for Seth. As she walks deeper into the spectral realm, she witnesses visions from the past, scenes that reveal the grim truth behind her family's curse. She sees her grandfather grieving over the lifeless body of his daughter Maya, who was murdered by Catherine while possessed by Mary's spirit. Then, possessed by Mary, Catherine takes her own life by slitting her throat. The terror doesn't end there. Tormented by Mary's relentless haunting, Allison's grandfather, driven to madness and despair, eventually commits suicide as well, leaving Susan as the only surviving member of the family. Not only does Allison witness the deaths of her grandfather and Catherine, but she also sees how Mary herself died and became the vengeful spirit that has haunted her family for generations. In the vision, Allison sees Mary shortly after marrying her grandfather. However, Mary is caught making love with another man. It is revealed that she never truly loved Allison's grandfather and had been secretly having an affair for some time. The discovery shatters her grandfather's heart, filling him with betrayal and rage. In a moment of despair and fury, Mary admits that she is pregnant, but the child she carries belongs to her lover, not to her husband. Overcome with anger and heartbreak, Allison's grandfather cannot control his emotions and shoots Mary, killing her and the unborn baby she was carrying. As she takes her final breath, Mary swears a curse upon his bloodline, vowing to bring endless suffering to every generation that follows. That curse would later spread across the entire family, bringing with it the relentless hauntings that torment Allison's lineage to this day. After killing Mary, Allison's grandfather tries to cover up his crime by secretly burying her body in a hidden place, hoping no one will ever discover the truth. When the vision ends, Allison suddenly hears the faint sound of a baby crying. It's Seth. The sound leads her to the area where Mary's grave lies. Desperate, Allison begins to dig, and to her overwhelming relief, she finds Seth alive. But her joy is short-lived. The spirit of Mary suddenly appears, approaching her menacingly, trying to stop Allison and Seth from returning to the living world. Just as Mary reaches out to seize them, Allison is jolted awake, back in the real world, but without Seth. Heartbroken, she believes she has failed. Yet moments later, her sorrow turns to astonishment and joy when Richard rushes in with wonderful news. Seth has returned, safe in his bed as if nothing ever happened. A week later, life for Allison and Richard seems to have returned to normal. Dave, who played a crucial role in saving Seth, stops by to check on them one last time. When he arrives, he sees movers carrying boxes into a truck. Allison and Richard are preparing to move to a new home. Richard, busy packing, greets Dave warmly and thanks him, saying that ever since the ritual, Mary's spirit has disappeared and their lives have been peaceful. Dave then asks where Allison is, wanting to say goodbye before they leave. Richard tells him to go inside and look for her. Dave walks through the house, calling Allison's name as he checks each room, but she's nowhere to be found. Instead, he finds Seth lying quietly in his bed. Feeling uneasy, Dave decides to give Seth his protective orb as a charm to shield him from any lingering negative energy. But as he pulls the orb from his pocket, it suddenly turns pitch black, signaling the presence of an extremely powerful and malevolent force. Realizing something is terribly wrong, Dave freezes. At that moment, Allison suddenly appears behind him. Meanwhile, Richard, confused as to why Dave hasn't come out yet, decides to check inside. When he enters the house, he is horrified to find Dave lying dead on the floor. Panic grips him as he realizes Seth is no longer in his bed. Then, from upstairs, he hears the faint cry of his son coming from the attic. Richard rushes up, heart pounding, and finds Seth, but the boy is lifeless. In that instant, Allison appears behind him. Her eyes are empty, her expression cold. Richard realizes too late that Allison is no longer herself. Mary's spirit has possessed her completely. Without hesitation, Allison, now under Mary's control, brutally kills Richard. After killing everyone in Allison's family, Mary feels her vengeance is finally fulfilled. With Mary still controlling Allison's body, she commits suicide to end the curse and complete her revenge. And the story ends.